Good evening, everyone. We are Team Typhoons. I'm Mohamed Hisshan, and with me are Raihan, Rizvie, and Adhni, Ikram. In March 2026, one of the world's busiest oil and gas corridors, the Strait of Hormuz, was shut down almost overnight. Today, we are going to walk you through what happened, why it happened, expose the deep flaw in how global shipping is run, and why Colombo, right here in Sri Lanka, suddenly found itself at the center of the story. We call it the new maritime paradigm because after this crisis, the old rules of shipping don't hold anymore. Here's the shape of our argument in four parts. First, the catalyst. The Hormuz conflict wiped out entirely 90% of vessel traffic through the strait almost instantly. Second, the contagion. That shock didn't stay local. It ripped through 3-4 million containers worth of trade and pushed up prices for fuel and goods worldwide. Third, our diagnostic. This crisis exposed what we call the efficiency versus resilience trap. Shipping companies built their entire system to be cheap and fast, not to survive a shock. And fourth, the Sri Lankan anger. The port of Colombo became one of the few safe harbors left standing, absorbing traffic that had nowhere else to go. And to make sure of why Hormuz failed so badly, we are using a framework we call the choke point to resilience index. It looks at six things: how politically stable the region is, how much trade depends on that route, whether there are backup routes, the physical shape of the waterway, its environmental risks, and its history of past disruptions. On paper, Hormuz should have scored well. It's heavily guarded and has solid infrastructure. But March 2026 proved that even a route everyone assumed was safe can collapse in days. That's the black swan moment our whole analysis is built around. So, what actually happened? Before 2026, Hormuz was moving a fifth of the world's oil and gas through a predictable, well run corridor. Then, military conflict broke out between the US, Israel, and the Iran. 16 commercial ships came under direct attack. Within days, shipping companies pulled out one of the Gulf entirely, and vessel traffic collapsed by 90%. That's the spark. Now, I'll hand it over to Raihan, who will show you exactly how that spark turned into a global fire.
Thanks, Ishan. Let's look at the numbers behind the collapse. 132 ships got stuck, locking up nearly 500,000 containers in total. 3.4 million containers, which is about 10% of the entire world's container fleet, were caught up in this mess. On the energy side, 20 million barrels of oil a day were suddenly blocked. Oil prices jumped 25% and jet fuel prices shot up nearly 60%. And it didn't stop there. Even everyday industrial materials like helium, fertilizer, and aluminium got more expensive. For context, when a similar but smaller crisis hit the Red Sea in 2023 and 2024, freight rates more than tripled. So this Hormuz shock was that same story, just bigger. We can actually map how this kind of shock spreads step by step. It starts with political friction. Hormuz effectively closes due to this. That triggers a logistic shock, which is basically insurance costs spike, ships are forced to take the long way around, and emergency surcharges get added as well. That feeds an energy crisis. Oil and fuel prices actually surge to to enormous levels. That pushes up the cost of raw materials like fertilizer and metals. And finally, all of that filters into the broader economy, slowing down demand and production everywhere. One closed rate, five stages, and the whole world feels it. Before the crisis, shipping ran on what's called a hub and spoke model. A small number of central routes handling almost everything because that was the cheapest way to do it. Once Hormuz shut down, ships had to reroute all the way around Africa via the Cape of Good Hope. That added 8 to 15 extra days to journeys, pushed costs up by over 10%, and sent insurance premiums soaring. We saw exactly this pattern during the Red Sea crisis too. Suez traffic dropped by over 80%, while Cape of Good Hope traffic jumped around 60%. The lessons were actually very simple. That industry's obsession with efficiency left it with almost no backup plan. So where does that leave the industry? On the strength side, companies already had digital tools for rerouting deep water ports like Colombo that could absorb larger ships and air cargo as a backup for urgent goods. But the weaknesses are serious. Everything depended on one fragile corridor. Hundreds of thousands of containers uh, got stranded, and backup was simply didn't have the space to absorb a 10% shift in global traffic overnight. On the opportunity side, Sri Lanka stands out clearly. Colombo already handles the majority of its cargo as transshipment and is expanding capacity. But there are real threats too. Rising insurance and fuel costs, congestion at backup ports, and rising costs for raw materials across agriculture and manufacturing are uh, like real problems. And out of everything, we just covered three problems which matter the most. Priority, such as like one is the insurance and energy cost surge. It hits companies' budgets immediately, right? But then again, before anyone has time to adapt, what we suggest is priority two is the forced rerouting around Africa. It uh, it like it eats up ship capacity and breaks delivery schedules due to fuel costs and like the need for extra fuel. And priority three, what we show is the congestion at backup ports like Colombo, because if the backup hubs get overwhelmed too, a regional problem becomes a much bigger global shutdown. Thirdly, that point is exactly where Sri Lanka comes in, and that's where Adhni will take over.
Thank you, Raihan. So now looking at how all of this affects Sri Lanka, well, Colombo sits right in the middle of all of this. This isn't just a regional port anymore. It's become one of the main relief points for cargo that has nowhere to go. Uh, Colombo handled a record 8.29 million containers in 2025. That's about 81% of this transshipment that's happening because of what's going on. Cargo just passing through. And with new terminal expansions underway, Colombo is on track to handle over 10 million containers a year. But this opportunity comes with a real strain, right? On the upside, Colombo is proving that it can absorb all of this diverted traffic, and this boom might actually be beneficial to Sri Lanka because it becomes a strategic sanctuary for all of the diverted transshipments. Yet, yards might also still feel highly constrained operationally because of overcrowding, and this has happened, and there's so many precedents for this happening, and thus it is indeed a double-edged situation. So this is just visualizing the overall paradox regarding how to minimize and also balance out the different factors. And it should be noted that due to the different factors that's involved, that this current choke point might actually cause more friction sometimes within Sri Lanka. Uh, but how should we go about the global logistics that has to be rebuilt? We see four main pillars. First, routing, shift away from single choke points like Hormuz toward multiple safe harbor ports across the world, including Colombo. So, second, cost strategy, accept that war risks are now simply part of doing business. I mean, the era of cheap global freight is over. The third is energy. Accelerate the shift to alternatives like methanol and ammonia. And the fourth is just inventory strategy overall. And finally, our conclusion as to what Sri Lanka should do in this moment is, in the short term, is prioritize, bringing the digital yard management systems under control and just overall smarter container tracking technology. And also in the long term, the goal should be much bigger. Use this current surge as an anchor point to attract international financing and also fast track the overall terminal just to benefit from this crisis, not just to benefit from this crisis temporarily. Uh, and that's our case. And thank you so much for listening. And this has been Team Typhoons. Thank you very much.